Okay. All right. Well, good morning or afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Joa Sandrani. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. We're excited to have you here for a discussion on pharmacy accreditation and how it supports safe and compliant compounding practices. So today's session, we'll be going over the ACHC and PCAB accreditation process and how it supports pharmacies in maintaining high standards for compounding practice. So before we begin, just a couple quick housekeeping notes. First, this session is recorded and it could be visited later on. And second, we do encourage you to submit questions during the presentation. And if you have any questions towards the end, we'll answer them as soon as possible if time allows. So it's now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We have Alicia Morrison and also Caroline Gerdo, who serves as the Pharmacy Program Director at ACHC. So during today's session, they'll cover the role of ACHC and PCAB in pharmacy accreditation, how accreditation supports safe and compliant pharmacy operations, practical compliance tips and best practices, real-world guidance for meeting USP 795, 797, and 800 compliance, and common challenges pharmacies face and strategies to address them. So I'll turn it over to the ACHC PCAB team. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Joa. As Joa mentioned, my name's Alicia. I lead our strategic partnership initiatives here at ACHC, and I thought I would just kind of kick us off with even just a few slides about who is ACHC, if you're not familiar with us. So we are a nationally recognized accreditation organization with more than 35 years of experience in accreditation. We started off as just a small accreditor in North Carolina, accrediting care at home providers, and then grew to a nationwide and even global accreditation organization. We accredit across the entire continuum of healthcare, and we have CMS deeming authority for a variety of programs, including DemiPost and home infusion therapy, home health, hospice, dialysis. And, a lot of times folks know us because we do have recognition by major third-party payers, and that's especially important in some of our pharmacy spaces. We are the only accreditor that's also accredited. We're certified by ISO. And that just makes sure that we've got a new, fresh set of eyes that looks at our quality management system every year to make sure that we're providing the best customer service that we can. So a little bit kind of about our mission and values is that we're truly dedicated to delivering the best possible experience and truly partnering with the organizations that we serve. We want to make sure that we are committed to these successful collaborations, without compromising quality, of course. But, we want to make sure that we're providing a nice educational experience and that we're really kind of meeting the organizations that we accredit where they're at and providing best practices, what we see, that works really well around the country. And then, of course, where there might be some opportunities for improvement as well. We are one of the only accreditors, like I mentioned, that can accredit across the continuum of healthcare. So we accredit, every, type of setting from acute care hospitals and then all different types of pharmacy, long-term care pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, PCAB, of course, and even community retail pharmacy as well under a DemiPost program. So organizations typically choose ACHC, or you might know us as PCAB, because our standards are truly created for providers by providers. They're relevant to the healthcare settings that we're going in and accrediting. They're not overburdensome, and they're actually pretty easy to interpret. We have all-inclusive pricing, so there's no hidden fees or survey or travel fees or anything like that. We have a true commitment to exceptional customer service, and we have dedicated support teams here for you. And sometimes folks say, most importantly, our surveyors are relevant and objective. Our surveyors especially are, very competent. We do a ton of ongoing training for them to make sure that they are providing consistent surveys across the sites that they survey. And kind of all of this points back to our customer satisfaction scores. We review this as a company every town hall that we have, so at least a few times a year. And we look at, how many of our customers are recommending ACHC and how many of them are reporting positive customer experiences, along with a few other kind of KPIs for us. But these are it's very important to us that we maintain high levels of customer satisfaction. one of the things that I get asked a lot about is kind of like, well, why? Like, why would a pharmacy pursue accreditation, especially for, in compounding pharmacy? And it's really just, kind of all of these boil down to PCAB accreditation demonstrates that, the commitment to the highest quality and safety standards, which provides patients and providers confidence in every compounded medication that you all prepare. So it can be a great source of, marketing for referrals, a way to distinguish yourself in the marketplace, can potentially help you qualify for additional contracts or partnerships. And, like we mentioned, it requires a strict compliance with these USP standards, which it helps overall improve patient quality and safety. So I'll turn it over to my counterpart to kind of go through some of the components of PCAB accreditation. Caroline?
Yeah, thank you so much, Alicia. Thanks for the introduction. So we're going to start off with a little bit more description of what PCAB is. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here with the audience here today. So hopefully, as I work through the slides, it's a good review of basic standards of both PCAB and USP requirements. And so hopefully, maybe you'll it's a nice review for you, and you can kind of cross-check in your mind. What is your practice really good at? Maybe where are some weaknesses or things that you might want to shore up on? And we'll try to leave time for questions at the end. So with that, PCAB accreditation, it was originally established in 2007 by 8 different pharmacy associations. They wanted to create a voluntary accreditation designation for the compounding industry. And this accreditation really focuses, again, on adherence to the USP 795, 797, and 800 requirements. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of the compounding market, the current market size for compounding is somewhere between 6 billion and 10 billion. Historically, non-sterile compounding has held the largest market share. However, sterile compounding is growing quickly, and it's projected that sterile compounding will grow the fastest over the next 10 years. That demand is really driven by personalized medicine, hormone replacement therapy, and advances in pain management. So with that, Alicia, you want to advance the slide? All right, so here's a broad overview of what the ACHC PCAB is reviewing when we come on site to do a survey. We consider our accreditations pretty rigorous. We focus heavily on how the site is conducting compounding. It's not unusual for these surveys to last between 2 and 4 days. I say that we come out roughly every 3 years. The accreditation lasts for 3 years. So when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, 2 to 4 days over the course of 3 years to make sure that your processes are, really up to the USP standards and performing at optimal ways and processes. I think that's hopefully a worthwhile investment. And we really try, and our CEO really emphasizes, we want our sites to get a return on investment. We want to be able to help you take your performance to the next level. All right, advance, please, thanks you. So with that, I do want to share one of our newer service lines is in the realm of out-of-state shipping or non-resident pharmacy inspections. So if you're a pharmacy that is shipping out of state and you're interested in perhaps using ACHC for our surveyors to conduct those out-of-state pharmacy inspections, we do have authority or privileges in several states, and we'd love to partner with you to get approval to do this kind of inspection in more states. I would say nationally overall, there's a shortage in pharmacy inspectors, and so we're happy to use our ACHC resources to help bridge that gap. Right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so we're going to focus beginning with non-sterile compounding. Next slide, please. So this first bullet, designating a designated person, we're going to talk about this with each one of the chapters that we're going to review today. I do want to emphasize its importance when we come on survey. This is something that a lot of sites, there are some gaps or deficiencies in how they've formulated their designated person. So it should be someone who is responsible and accountable for the performance and operations of both the facility and the personnel who are compounding. Again, we see common deficiencies in either the job description failing to include all the responsibilities that are part of the USP chapter or the compounding operation that you're doing. And then the policies and procedures should also identify the names and job titles of the designated person. It's also important that the designated person be reviewing and updating your facility's policies and procedures at least every 12 months. And we like to see if the designated person has signed and dated those policies or made some sort of record that they looked at those policies and procedures every year. Another common deficiency that we see with our compounders is a direct oversight over the compounded non-sterile preparations. It's recommended that training be done initially and then every 12 months. Often technicians who are compounding, they don't have access to the USP chapter. So I would just encourage you to try to download those chapters and have them available to your staff as a point of reference and make them feel comfortable accessing sort of the Bible of compounding. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Thank you. So USP 795 is focused on buildings and facilities. Some common deficiencies that we see when we come on site for PCAB is that there's no clear designated compounding area. We also recommend that, many sites have adopted a 24/7 or continuous temperature and humidity monitoring, but if that data feed goes offline, sometimes the staff are unaware of either how to retrieve the data or if something's out of range, it's not showing up because again, it fell off of the continuous monitoring. So just a robust process in terms of how to keep up with excursions. Sometimes we advise that you have the continuous monitoring, but then you have someone manually checking those temperatures and humidities at least once on a daily basis. And then, if something isn't feeding through all the way for reporting, then you're hopefully more likely to catch that. I would also say that calibration of your equipment, whether it be temperature monitoring, biological safety cabinets, or containment ventilated enclosures, those all need to be certified for non-sterile at least once a year or by manufacturer requirements, whichever one is more frequent. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit more about the master formulation records as well as compounding records and beyond use dating. So master formulation records and compounding records are required. It's not a should now, it's a must. And basically for each unique formulation that your pharmacy makes, you want to have a master formulation record. You also want to have a compounding record for each single compound from the master formulation that you are dispensing. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the common deficiencies that we see in this area. So for the master formulation record, it should be detailed enough so that if you have a new technician coming in and they had to compound off of your master formulation record, they would be able to compound that product without additional assistance. You want to ensure that every step is spelled out and that the calibration of equipment is contained in those instructions. For any equipment that's used, you want to ensure that your master formulation record also includes how long that equipment needs to be running. Another new thing with this update in the 795 chapter is that, your master formulation record should also include a physical description of what the final product is supposed to look like, including color and texture, for example. You want to make sure that you have supporting evidence for what the beyond use date should be. Where did it come from? Make sure that any tests that need to be performed are also outlined on the master formulation record. Another place where we see deficiencies is, under weight variation testing. So if you're performing that test, was it included on your master formulation record? And even more importantly, were the results of that test recorded and documented? The other section here on this slide is focusing on beyond use dating. So for 795, they really shifted from a focus of water containing to be a new concept of water activity, and that's based on USP 1112. And, just the prior chapter or version of 795, there were arbitrary beyond use dating assignments, and now it's really based on how much free water is available in that compound to proliferate microbial growth. The maximum beyond use date is now 180 days, and if beyond use dates are assigned using stability studies, it's important to indicate the analytical method that you use to derive that BUD. And with that, we can advance to the next slide. All right, so focusing on visual inspections, cleaning, and disinfecting. So in the old chapter, between the old one and the new one, USP really spelled out the documentation for visual inspection. So visual inspection has to be conducted prior to dispensing. So if you compound a product today, but you're going to dispense it tomorrow, it's important that the compound be essentially inspected twice. First at the end of compounding and then re-inspected prior to dispensing to ensure that the color and texture, for example, are the same as yesterday. For cleaning and sanitizing, I want to point out table 1 of the chapter in 795. It spells out when floors, walls, ceilings, and other areas need to be cleaned. A common deficiency that we'll see in this area is that people will often go down a checklist for a cleaning log, but they're not really recording who cleaned it, what time of day it was cleaned, and what were the cleaning agents that were used as part of that process. I also want to just focus, sorry, one more thing about cleaning. We'll talk a lot about cleaning because we see a lot of deficiencies in this particular area. So another thing that's really good is that this documentation of your cleaning and sanitizing, if you get a patient complaint, for example, about a product causing a skin infection or a rash, for example, those logs will help you with your investigations and possibly with corrective actions. So, missteps often happen when you have a new technician performing the compounding. And similarly, or alternatively, you could have a really experienced technician who is starting to make shortcuts to their cleaning process. So we see both ways for creating those holes. All right, so with that, we'll advance to the next slide. And one more slide, please. Well, okay, so now we'll focus on 797. So similar to 795, 797 is requiring the appointment of a designated person. In this chapter, for the previous version to the new version, we went from low risk, low, medium, and high risk to category 1, 2, and 3. So the real difference here is that it's, with the new categories, it's based on the number of sterile products that you're mixing, as well as whether or not it involved non-sterile products. And these new categories take into consideration environmental monitoring, sterility testing, and changes in beyond use states. There's also a breakdown. Maybe go one more slide for me, please. Or forward, yeah. So I really like this table here. So this is giving you a breakdown of the differences in categories 1, 2, and 3 compounding. All of these need to be compounded in an ISO class 5 primary engineering control. Category 1 can be compounded in an unclassified segregated area. However, categories 2 and 3 must be compounded in a clean room suite. In category 1, the raw ingredients must be sterile. However, in category 2 or 3, compounding with raw ingredients can be sterile or non-sterile. Category 1 involves aseptic processing with no additional sterility testing required. In category 2 and 3, there's a bit of a additional sterile testing that needs to take place, and the terminal sterilization can be steam or dry oven heat. Sterility testing is an optional step in category 2 compounding. However, it's required in category 3 compounding. All right, Alicia, thank you. You can move to the next slide. So for training and competency, again, these are all the basics, but again, we see deficiencies in how these are conducted across the different sites that we're serving. So I think it's worth repeating. For training and competency, hand hygiene is something to definitely emphasize and train your people on best practices. So you want to, wash your hands from your fingertips all the way down to your elbow, and it should be for at least 30 seconds. And then to dry one's hands, use a low lint wipe. The order of garbing will depend on your pharmacy's policies and procedures, and it's also dependent on the location of your sink. So is your sink located on the clean or dirty side of your anteroom? If the sink is outside the anteroom, of course, this is not ideal, and the sink should ideally be on the clean side on the line of demarcation. Sterile gloves must be donned in a classified area or segregated compounding area, and gloves cannot be put on inside the hood. Hand hygiene and garbing also includes visual observation. You must do a glove fingertip sample on all fingers and thumbs prior to compounding. And then to pass, there should be 0 colony forming units on both hands. And this has to happen 3 times in a row. So if someone passes the first 2 samples and fails the 3rd glove fingertip, then the whole series has to be started over again. Competency should be demonstrated at least once every 6 months for category 1 and 2, and every 3 months for category 3 compounding. If you have a pharmacist who is not compounding but providing direct oversight over your compounders, then the recommended cadence is once a year, once every 12 months. And with that, you can go to the next slide. So in addition to hand hygiene and garbing, one must do aseptic media field validation. And this includes visual observation as well as a media field test that can contain no more than 3 colony forming units on both hands. You also have to do a surface sample of the direct compounding area before you apply any sterile alcohol to that surface or deck. The validation step must be conducted initially and every 6 months for category 1 and 2 compounding, and at least every 3 months for category 3 compounding. For pharmacies who have pharmacists, who have direct oversight, again, it's initially and then every 12 months. Next slide, please. So focusing on facility and engineering controls. So in the old chapter, compounding aseptic isolators or compounding aseptic containment isolators could be in a unclassified area. However, with the new chapter or version of this chapter, that has changed. So that's no longer the case, and isolators must be contained in an ISO 7 class buffer room. Within your clean room, it's important to have air returns that are low on the wall. I've walked into many construction projects over the years where they've, for whatever reason, decided they didn't need low air returns, and then I'm trying to put in work requests and construction change orders at the last minute to try to reroute all the duct work. So if that's not, if you're already operating in a place that doesn't have low air returns, then it's really important to conduct smoke studies so that you can, make sure that there's no stagnant airflow. So access to doors should be hands-free, and just a reminder that pressure differentials, they were narrowed down to 3 decimal places because in the previous chapter, people were taking something else and rounding it up. So they tried to be more precise about how that's captured. Additionally, it's really important, especially with the seasons changing right now, that your temperature you want for compounding to be 20 degrees Celsius or cooler, or also have a relative humidity of 60% or less. Next slide, please. So we'll focus a little bit on certification and recertification. So the hoods and the secondary engineering controls should be certified every 6 months, and the designated person needs to review the results of your reports and preferably sign and date them. So that acknowledges that the designated person looked at them and that everything within that report is meeting specifications. So I just want to call out that all of the different elements with the red asterisk is that these are tests that should all be performed under dynamic operating conditions. So it's really important in the report that the number of compounders be documented in the certification report. All right, moving to the next slide, please. All right, microbial viable air and surface monitoring. So the requirements are that this be performed for viable air sampling category 1 and 2 every 6 months. Category 3 should be done within 30 days before starting category 3 compounding, and then monthly thereafter. With surface sampling, this should be performed monthly for category 1 and 2, and then weekly for category 3. It's also the thresholds for action levels for an ISO 8 classified area. The threshold has changed from 100 CFUs to greater than 50 CFUs. And for both air and surface sampling, an attempt must be made to identify any microorganisms recovered to the genus level. Next slide, please. All right, so focusing on cleaning, disinfecting, again, the master formulation records and compounding records. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide to describe for you some of the common deficiencies that we see in these areas. So again, what should be done best practice and per USP is located on this slide, but I'm going to focus on things that we see on survey that are not meeting the mark. So in the category of cleaning, some of the things that we'll find are use of expired cleaning agents. We'll find cleaning agents used in the monthly clean that do not contain a sporicidal agent. And also the sequence of cleaning, typically going from dirtiest to cleanest. People get things out of order and the sequence is not correct. Deficiencies in the master formulation records include lack of complete instructions. Perhaps they don't include a physical description of the final compounded sterile product. And then the BUD or reference source to support that BUD are not present or available. And then some deficiencies that we commonly see for compounding records, it could be missing a vendor lot number expiration date for each component, including sterile water that may be used for reconstitution. And then for quality control processes that may not be documented, including visual inspection, filter integrity test, pH or sterility testing. I think you can advance to the next slide, please. Perfect. All right, so release inspections and testing. So in the old chapter, BUDs were based on professional resources and storage conditions, and now BUDs are also based on compounding methods in addition to chapter requirements. So some questions to ask yourself are what are the condition of the starting components? Are they sterile or non-sterile? Was your sterile product aseptically processed or terminally sterilized? Was sterility testing performed, and how did it pass? Did it pass? And if not, why? Some of the CSPs requiring testing for category 3, it's important to note per USP that the max size limit is 250 units. And within testing for those 250 units, depending on your batch size, down at the bottom, you can see the breakpoints for the number of units that you must test for sterility testing based on the batch size. All right, next slide, please. All right, so a little bit more of a deeper dive on, beyond use dates. I want to focus on that last section, focusing on category 3. So it's sort of the point of no return. So once you start compounding in category 3, it requires a new level of commitment and adherence. You really can't turn back. So you want to think about the extra cost and maintenance, like the application of weekly sporicidal agent. You also have increased environmental and surface sampling requirements. And in category 3, you have to wear a bunny suit because you can't have exposed pant legs and no skin can be showing. There's also additional testing. Each category 3 batch has to go through USP 71 sterility testing and USP 85 endotoxin testing. Next slide, please. All right, so just a brief touch on quality assurance and quality control, because again, we see deficiencies or missteps with this part of the process. So really want your policies and procedures to address notification and recall of compounded sterile products that do not meet specifications. And if you do not have a robust recall process, this is something that we cite commonly as a deficiency. So you want to think ahead about what data you want to gather and what reports you need to run. How will you notify your patients and your providers when you have a recall, and how will you document that communication? This material or focus can also be used to address corrective actions and conduct investigations to prevent similar batch excursions from happening again. All right, next slide, please. All right, we're going to pivot over to USP 800 and some of the highlights with this one. So this is really focusing on patient and employee safety, as well as focus on environmental protection. Next slide, please. All right, so USP 800 was first published in 2019 and became enforceable in November of 2023. It's important to note that not all state boards of pharmacy have adopted it, including Kentucky and Indiana. Similar to the other chapters, USP 800 is requiring a designated person. One of the credentials that many of our surveyor pharmacists have, and is offered through our ACHCU, and U stands for university. We have a whole curriculum or training component or education component to our organization. And so, for example, one of my colleagues has the designation HDDP, and what that stands for is Hazardous Drug Designated Person. So ACHC has an entire course that really teaches pharmacists or a designated person on how to become trained to be a hazardous drug designated person. So I just want to share that in case that may be of interest to you. So it's important to note with the adoption of USP 800 that your site wants to create a site-specific hazardous drug list. So many of us are, if we're working or have experience working in health systems, we're, familiar with the concept of a drug formulary. So this is taking it one step further, and it's really, a list of all the hazardous drugs that your facility is compounding and dispensing. So it's not a static list. It needs to be reviewed and updated at least every 12 months. And it must also include NIOSH criteria, because there's constantly new hazardous drugs that are coming on the market, and there needs to be like a thought process in terms of how your organization is going to decide what level of containment that particular new drug needs to contain. And then in terms of, I just want to call out that the two categories with the highest risk for hazardous compounding include active pharmaceutical ingredients, and then also table 1 antineoplastics. So manipulation of an API or manipulation of a table 1 antineoplastic, those have to follow very strict USP requirements. Next slide, please. All right, so good news in the sense that if you are working with hazardous drugs that don't fall either within a table 1 NIOSH antineoplastic or an API, then your site does have some flexibility in terms of how you want to contain the other types of products that you might be using. So you're able to work through an assessment of risk or an AOR to decide at your pharmacy or facility how you want to proceed in invoking containment strategies. Next slide, please. All right, so with a focus on training and competency, similar to 797, there's rigorous accountability here. So it's important that your staff be trained every 12 months, and they also need to be trained or educated on any new hazardous drugs that you're adding to your list. It's important that your employees have an acknowledgement of what the risks might be if they're exposed to hazardous drugs, and then also an understanding of what alternative duty options may be available to those employees should they need to step away from exposure or compounding to hazardous drugs. And of course, the most common scenario that I've seen in practice for where I've worked in the past has been, the time frame of pregnancy, and maybe having those technicians do other duties during that time period. In terms of competency, things to think about are you want to provide education of an overview of your entire hazardous drug list and their risks, review policies and procedures, really teach and have your staff understand the use of PPE, and then also training if they haven't already been trained on closed system transfer devices, and also the operation of the biological safety cabinets that are involved in hazardous compounding. Certainly you want to train your staff on spill management and disposal of waste. So all of these are elements that should be included in your staff training. Next slide, please. All right, so here, this is giving you just a little, actually, I think this is, I'm sorry, this is a duplicate slide, so we can advance. Okay, so PPE. So this is very high level. There's so much more that goes into hazardous drug PPE, but I just want to touch on really, you have to train your staff basically from the time something comes in from a wholesaler through all the steps in compounding, and then, again, trading on how they're going to dispose of any waste that may be left behind. It's very important that your site or facility is buying gloves that are ASTM rated with that number that's presented there, and they should be powder free. The gowns must be disposable, made of polyethylene coated polypropylene or another laminate material. Again, with the double gowning and there's so many double PPE that has to be done for HD compounding. But again, the outer layer should close in the back and be long sleeved and hopefully have nip cuffs to prevent skin exposure. And of course, there's also a STM rating for the gowns as well. And then I just want to give a call out to, the potential for breathing in harmful substances. So there is recommendations in USP for fit tested NIOSH certified N95s or a protective respirator such as a powder air purifier respirator. Next slide, please. So just a little bit more about the compounding and facility engineering. So the containment primary engineering control this is for, let me check. This is for non-sterile hazardous compounding. So it's preferred that the primary engineering controls be externally ventilated. And some examples include a containment ventilated enclosure, and that's a picture of what you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And then for the room itself, secondary engineering controls, again, ideally it should be negative pressure with the water column specifications listed on the slide. It's also recommended that the room have fixed walls and be separated from non-hazardous storage and compounding areas. And it's also recommended that there be 12 air exchanges per hour within that room to help filter the air. Next slide, please. So this is focusing on sterile hazardous compounding. So in this case, the primary engineering controls must be externally vented, and some examples include a class 2 biological safety cabinet or this containment isolator that you see shown on the right-hand side. Here for sterile compounding, the air exchanges per hour is more rigorous with a minimum of 30 in the ISO class 7 buffer room, as well as that, well, the buffer rooms should hopefully be connected to an anteroom. And again, the concept is you want the hazardous substances, contained in that room and hopefully sucked out and exhausted to the outside. Next slide, please. So an additional safety step that most of the places that I have worked have employed is using closed system transfer devices. This doesn't work for all forms of HD, but if it's a liquid and a vial, there's a lot of flexibility in using closed system transfer devices. And so I think most of you all are familiar with this, but again, the needles are contained within the plastic that you see in the plastic shown on the right. And essentially you're, connecting one apparatus to another, and hopefully it minimizes spills and also the potential for needle sticks. So it hopefully minimizes exposure to the employee who's making it. All right, and then I'll just, that last bullet on the slide there is just really emphasizing that closed system transfer devices are a must when it comes to administering antineoplastics to a patient. Next slide, please. So I like the slide, similar to the category 1, 2, 3. It's a nice table, and it really breaks down the frequency and type of cleaning step that should be invoked in a hazardous sterile compounding area. So the different elements of the clean room are shown on the left-hand side. So essentially the hoods, the sinks, any removable trays, pass-through chambers, and floors, those should all have daily cleaning and disinfection. Then I'll emphasize what's on that last row. So the secondary engineering controls, the walls, doors, door frames, really all the nooks and crannies that are within your clean room those should be decontaminated, disinfected, and also have a sporicidal agent applied monthly. Next slide, please. So I do want to emphasize it's important that your pharmacy comply with OSHA's hazardous communication standards and really understand what's called this hierarchy of control diagram on the right. And I'll walk through that in a minute. So just to highlight again, for staff training, it's really important that your employees know who the safety officer is and how to access safety data sheets in the event of an exposure or spill. It's also important that they know the accessibility of eye wash stations and also know where to find a spill kit and proper use of PPE. So as a pharmacist, we spend so much time focusing on training and proper use of PPE, but when you look at the hierarchy of controls, it's really like the lowest or least effective in terms of minimizing risk and exposure. I'll just walk through the different sections real fast. So administrative controls would be your policies and procedures. The engineering controls are, of course, the hood and the clean room or the room in which you're performing hazardous compounding. Substitution is excellent when there are two therapeutically equivalent drugs that one might be using to treat the same condition. It doesn't work all the time, but that's where the power of a pharmacist is in terms of making a recommendation for a substitution from a hazardous drug to a non-hazardous drug if one's available. And lastly, of course, the most powerful way to prevent exposure is to eliminate the hazardous substance entirely. Next slide, please. All right, so I want to focus on two more elements of hazardous compounding before we wrap up. So these are new elements to the chapter. They're not mandatory, but they're highly recommended. So the first one is wipe sampling. So this is a means for your facility to detect how well your primary and secondary engineering controls and cleaning are working. You can perform wipe samples to look for residue for antineoplastics or hormones, for example. It's recommended that the hazardous wipe sampling occur every 6 months to verify containment. And the surface wipe sampling should include the hoods, any equipment in your hoods, pass-through chambers, surfaces, both pre and post compounding, as well as the space immediately outside of your HD buffer room or your segregated compounding area. And then I would also emphasize doing surface sampling in areas where patients are receiving hazardous drugs is also important. And I'll just share a really brief story with you. When I was working in one of my locations, the nurse called down to the pharmacy and said, I need you to make the chemo again. And I was like, what happened? And so she programmed the pump correctly, had everything working, and she left the room and all the chemotherapy infused on the floor. So this would be a perfect example of where your staff, nursing and pharmacy or whoever's involved in the administration, that they need to know where to find the spill kit, how to use the spill kit. And then after all of the cleaning's been done, this would be a perfect example of where HD wipe sampling would be preferred. Next slide, please. So I do want to also give a call out or recommendation for medical surveillance. So again, this is not mandatory, but it's definitely recommended. And essentially, if your facility is doing a lot of hazardous compounding, this is, an attempt to try to minimize exposure or tracking of adverse health effects in the employees that are exposed to those hazardous agents. So it involves assessment and documentation of both symptoms, physical findings, and often labs are drawn, a Chem7 and a CBC, to look for deviations from baseline or changes over time. And, one thing I'll just mention here is that this, of course, I know this is an extra step and requires additional time and resources, but I do think it sends a signal to your employees that their health matters and that you take it seriously, that you're really trying to, protect their health and well-being. Next slide, please. I think that might be the end, but let me double check. I think it's passing off back to you, right, Alicia? I think you might be on mute.
There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks so much, Caroline. So I know we covered a ton of discussion and topics, and we've got some time for questions, but I just wanted to give you all kind of like a sneak peek into some of the educational resources that ACHC and our, or the educational arm of our organization provide, ACHCU. We've got a ton of workshops. We just did pretty recently a great workshop for compounding pharmacies available on our ACHCU page that goes over all of the different kind of components of how to achieve accreditation, how to successfully, get into compliance with the USP 795, 797, and 800. We've got a ton of free webinars that go over things outside of, just accreditation. And then we also have a regulatory page that we've linked here that you can bookmark, and we keep that pretty much up to date. If there's, anything, new or happening in the regulatory landscape that pertains to pharmacy. We also have a really robust strategic partner kind of channel that offer a lot of great resources, often at a discounted price for you all. So, things like marketing components or ways to grow your business, take a peek at that page. We've also just finished up the construction on a mock clean room. So we're going to be offering some in-person and virtual sterile compounding training. Our goal is to offer 5 different modules. So, covering everything from basic aseptic technique all the way to non-sterile to sterile in category 3 compounding. So we are super excited about that one. We've got our first module coming up in April. And we're also hoping to partner with schools of pharmacy and potentially offer a course to train pharmacy inspectors in the future. If you are accredited with us, or even if you're not and you're interested in getting some of these resources, you can always create a customer central portal account to get full access to the standards, state specific resources, and then also look at things to help you prepare for a survey, your items needed for survey, your performance pharmacy performance improvement request form, helpful hints, top cited standards, and even continuous compliance guides. And I think that that's all Caroline and I had to go over. So I'll stop sharing and we'll open it up to questions.
I did have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with ACHC, PCAB, when it comes to the sterility testing, you guys do take validated methods as well, like scan RDI?
Mm. That's a good question, Joe. I'll have to do some research and get back to you.
Yeah, because I think scan RDI has been discussed pretty robustly amongst like sterile compounders.
Uh-huh.
So I wonder, we're not using it in our facility actually, just because of the results. We can't identify the bugs, but that's a pretty common question from my staff because the turnaround time is a lot faster.
Okay, so basically, if you're having to demonstrate sterility testing, that results from scan RDI would be permissible.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, I have your email, so I'll follow up with you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joa.
Thank you.
Okay. May I? Two questions. Another one regarding sterility. If it's done in sterility testing done by the outside provider, outside lab, should I document what kind of method those outside lab use, or is it already kind of like given that they know what they're doing?
No, you bring up a really good point. I would get the technique or the method that they're using for the sterility testing 100%.
Okay. And another question regarding dunning requirements. It's kind of, you mentioned that it's supposed to be done in the segregated compounding area. I would love to do that. But USP requirement is after I'm washing my hands, I'm supposed to add long-acting alcohol on my hands and put gloves on the long-acting alcohol immediately, which makes it the dunning have to be done in the ante room, not on the segregated compounding area, unfortunately. So how to deal with that situation? Any advice?
Okay. So I'm just want to repeat it back to you to make sure I heard. So this is sterile compounding, and
Yes, sterile compounding.
and you're saying you want to don the gloves in the anteroom or in the buffer room?
According to the USP standards, when I'm donning gloves, before I'm doing it, I have to wash my hands and apply long-acting alcohol immediately.
Yes. Yes.
After I'm applying long-acting alcohol, I have to put gloves.
Yes.
So that kind of put location near the sink area in the ante room, and unfortunately cannot go into the segregated compounding area and gloves there.
So I think there's flexibility in where this is non-hazardous or hazardous.
That's well, I would say that's regardless. I'm applying
Yeah.
long-acting alcohol
You're
before
applying,
putting
yeah.
gloves.
Yeah. So I think with USP, my understanding is that for non-hazardous, there's flexibility in you putting gloves on in the actual buffer room. Like you don't have to put it on in the ante room. That said, I'm one of those, my biases is, I would prefer no exposed skin or hands in the buffer room. But so if, there, yeah, sometimes people have to stand there and let the alcohol dry before they can put, so yeah, it's it's an
Yes, that's a
additional
controversial
time
area.
element. Yeah.
And last question, I promise.
Yeah.
I do use bunny suits, and
Uh-huh.
currently it's category 2. Can I use washable bunny suits if they autoclaved before each use, basically sterilized before each use? Because you mentioned that for category 3 they have to be single use, but how about category 2?
Great question. I do not know the answer to that. Let me do some research. I took your name down, and if I can get, maybe I'll send it through Hillary, but I'll respond to your question and she can forward it back to you. That's reasonable.
Thanks so much. Really
Yep.
appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
In
thank
my
you for the questions, because this is real world stuff, and we want to make sure that, I want to make it applicable and help support all of you in your compounding efforts. So yeah, anything else?
Well, just a comment. In my search for looking on those bunnies, reusable bunny suits, I found 2 types. One of them is for the clean room category 4, uh, and that's up to ISO 4. Another type, they go up to the ISO 10.
Okay.
Both of those are reusable, both of those are washable.
And but your context is all in the context of category 2 compounding.
Mine all in category 2, yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll have to double check. I mean, my understanding is that I've always been trained on disposable, but I want to make sure I research your question.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Any feedback?
These are really good questions.
Yeah, that was a very good question. Well, I think the ACHC PCAB team did an amazing job to be able to put all 3 chapters in less than an hour. That's a talent that I feel like not everybody can achieve. So thank you so much for what you provided and the information that you shared. And we're thankful that you're opening up the floor for us to ask you further questions. I think if we don't have any more additional questions, I just want to remind everyone that this session is recorded and you will have access to it later on. And honestly, I think the slides are amazing. It's a good summary to share with your staff. Our facility is PCAB accredited ourselves, and it actually really upholds our culture of safety and compliance across all of our stores. So thank you both for your presentation, and thank you everybody for joining.
we appreciate being able to be part of it. And for anybody that attended live, they get a free USP 795, 797, and 800 self-assessment. So we'll make sure that that gets sent out as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mhm. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a great